Hey guys, tonight we step into the soft red dust of 14th century Timbuktu, a city that smells of dried fish, honey tea, and sun-warmed parchment. You're not in some fantasy novel, you're standing at the crossroads of gold and wisdom, in a place where camels outnumber carriages and knowledge flows like the Niger River after rain. The air is thick with smoke from cooking fires and whispers of verses from ancient texts. Somewhere nearby, someone is copying a manuscript by hand, each letter stroked with reverence. But let's get real, you probably wouldn't survive this. Between the Saharan heat, the risk of dysentery from river water, and the complete lack of air conditioning or Google Maps, this dreamy book lover's paradise was also a serious test of stamina. Still, if you could survive, you'd be living in one of the most intellectually electric cities in the medieval world. Yes, even rivaling Oxford or Baghdad. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments so our little sleepy history club can feel just a bit closer. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've arrived at twilight. The air smells like warm sand and roasting dates. The wind kicks up a powdery cloud across the stone paths of Timbuktu, soft enough to blur the footprints of the merchants who walked here minutes before. There are no skyscrapers, just mud brick buildings glowing amber in the setting sun. Minarets jut like fingers into the sky. Somewhere, a muezzin calls the faithful to prayer, and the sound dances across the city's flat rooftops like a lullaby. You brush dust from your sandals and move toward the marketplace. A boy jogs past you with a sack full of papyrus scraps, humming something that sounds suspiciously like a memorized geometry proof. You glance at his feet, bare, fast, familiar with every stone and crack of this desert city. Your guide explains, that child is a scholar in training. He's headed to a Quranic school just past the mosque, where today's lesson includes algebra, astronomy, and poetry. He's 9. You pass a group of elders discussing trade routes and rainfall patterns. Their robes swirl in the wind. One strokes his beard, quoting lines from an Arabic poem so effortlessly it's like breathing. In Timbuktu, you'll find scholars who've memorized hundreds of books. Not chapters, books. And books are everywhere. You hear it before you see it, the dry flap of parchment as a merchant flips through his stall's treasures. Some are wrapped in goatskin, others bundled with twine or tucked into wooden cases. The texts smell like cloves and dust, like they've absorbed centuries of knowledge and a few too many cooking fires. You pause at a manuscript with swirling calligraphy and a doodle of a bird wearing a scholar's cap. The merchant grins. A scholar's joke. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's book trade truly surpassed that of contemporary Cairo or Cordoba, but one thing's certain, this city had books, thousands of them, and the hunger for more was insatiable. You duck into a modest courtyard. Reed mats line the floor. A teacher with ink-stained fingers nods at you. Around him, children recite verses. Some of them can't write yet, but they can quote entire legal texts by heart. You settle onto a mat, the scent of hibiscus and charcoal drifting around you. You're not a tourist here. You're a student now. The night deepens. Somewhere, a drumbeat begins, soft, like a heartbeat under sand. You tilt your head. It's not celebration. It's a signal. A caravan has returned. Dozens of camels sway into view, their humps draped in dyed cloth, their sides brushing against bundles of salt, gold, and, most precious of all, books. Each camel a walking library. You blink at the stars. The sky here feels wider, heavier with stories. You wonder if the people of Timbuktu ever looked up at these constellations and felt as small and sleepy as you do now. You wake to the smell of sun-warmed sand and the creak of woven baskets being unloaded. The courtyard is already buzzing, though the sun has barely cleared the horizon. Vendors lay out their wares, salt slabs stacked like gold bars, pots of indigo dye glowing like beetle shells, dried fish strewn on cords like garlic. But you? You're here for the gold, the kind that built Timbuktu, and not the metaphorical kind, though you'll get plenty of that, too. You walk with a merchant down a narrow alley between buildings the color of cinnamon. He's cheerful, his laugh loud, his tunic stained with saffron. He waves toward the towering Jingareber Mosque and tells you that without gold, none of it, would exist. Gold is why people cross the Sahara with their teeth clenched against sandstorms. It's why kings kneeled before other kings and made cities bloom where only scrubland once lay. Timbuktu sits at a crossroad, the Niger River to the south, the salt mines of Tagaza to the north, and gold-rich territories to the west. You've stumbled into a natural nexus, perfect for trade, perfect for power, and eventually, perfect for books. Historians still debate just how much gold Mali produced in the 14th century, but the estimates boggle the modern mind. Some say nearly half of the world's gold supply came from this region. It's a little like discovering that your favorite sleepy town also happens to be the Silicon Valley of precious metals. You reach a bustling open plaza, where nuggets of gold change hands in quiet deals over bowls of millet porridge. One trader shows you a scale that fits in the palm of his hand, used to measure gold dust so fine it clings to your sweat. Another pulls a hollow reed from his robe, an improvised straw for blowing gold into tiny piles. You sneeze once and feel like you've committed a felony. But it's not just the traders who benefit. Gold finances mosques. It pays scribes. It buys paper from Egypt and inks from Morocco. With enough gold, a man can afford to study full-time, to copy entire libraries by hand, to commission manuscripts on astronomy, law, mysticism, and, if he's a little eccentric, even veterinary care for camels. You pause at a shaded veranda where an elderly woman sits cross-legged, braiding a young girl's hair. A book lies open beside them. It's not a prop. It's a primer on medicinal herbs, written in Arabic but annotated in Songhai. You don't interrupt. You just listen as the woman recites plant names with the cadence of a lullaby. You catch a few: senna, baobab, kinkelaba. Her fingers move as steadily as her words. The city pulses around you. Donkeys bray, children chase each other through alleyways, a scholar argues with a fisherman over the meaning of a Quranic verse. You realize that knowledge here doesn't belong to the elite, it floats through the air, passed between market stalls and prayer rugs like gossip. Timbuktu's wealth wasn't hoarded in palaces. It was absorbed into the bones of the city, into its books, its teachers, its rituals. And though you might think of gold as cold and hard, here it has a scent: roasted grains, burnt sugar, sandalwood. It smells like possibility. Of course, not everyone came for the right reasons. Greed followed the gold. So did politics, jealous rulers, and, eventually, invaders. But that's for later. For now, you linger in the golden hour of Timbuktu's golden age. A breeze stirs the hem of your tunic. Somewhere nearby, a scribe dips his pen in ink and begins to write. His fingers tremble slightly, not from fear, but reverence. You don't ask what the book is about. You know the answer already. It's about everything. You're walking now, ankle-deep in rust-colored dust, beside a train of camels groaning under heavy loads. Their breath steams faintly in the morning chill, and their broad, padded feet print soft craters into the ground. Their cargo? Not gold. Not grain. Salt. Slabs of it. Gray-white, gritty, and shimmering under the Sahel sun like polished marble. Each chunk is the size of a small suitcase, strapped tight with leather cords, and carried hundreds of miles from the northern mines of Tagaza. The caravan master, an older man with skin like baked clay and eyes sharp as broken glass, tells you something that makes you pause. Salt, he says, is more valuable than gold in the north. Gold is for kings. Salt is for life. You glance at your guide. He nods. It's not a joke. In the scorching deserts of West Africa, salt isn't just seasoning, it's survival. It preserves meat, balances the body, and even heals wounds. In Timbuktu, salt bought books. Salt built schools. Salt carved roads across nothingness and turned it into empire. Historians still argue whether the salt-for-gold trade routes began centuries earlier or evolved organically, but by the 14th century, they were deeply entrenched. Caravans could stretch for miles, hundreds of camels, dozens of men, a floating city on the move. And every step taken across that Sahara came with the promise of wealth and knowledge exchanged under the stars. You join the caravan for a while, the rhythm of its bells oddly soothing. Every few miles, the camels rest. The men drink deeply from leather pouches and chew cola nuts to stay alert. You're offered one, it tastes like bitter fire and gasoline. You pretend to like it. Later, you sit with a trader named Idris. He unwraps a bundle of cloth and reveals not spices, but a scroll. I found this in Sigil Masa, he says, north of the desert. The scholar wanted salt. I wanted stories. The scroll is in Arabic, with the date 1341 inked in crimson. Its topic? The medicinal properties of salt. You raise your eyebrows. Idris grins. Even salt has poetry. Back in the city, the salt arrives like a royal procession. Children race ahead of the camels, shouting and singing. Merchants line up to inspect the slabs, running damp fingers along the grain to check purity. Some will be ground into flakes, others broken down and stored in pottery jars beside flour and turmeric. But the best slabs, the purest white, unmarred by cracks, are destined for the scholars. Why? Because those scholars, copying texts for hours under flickering lamplight, sweat profusely. And when a scribe's fingers cramp or his vision blurs, a pinch of salt and a sip of sour milk restore him. You peek into a scriptorium, there's a bowl of salt next to every inkwell. The scholars have another use for salt, too. One that's rarely written down. Protection. Some believe salt wards off jealous spirits that linger near precious texts. A sprinkling across the threshold of a library, a hidden pouch sewn into a book's leather cover, these quiet superstitions are woven into daily life. Quirky? Sure. But you also watch a young scribe pause mid-sentence, touch a grain of salt to his tongue, and whisper something you don't understand. His fingers relax. He keeps writing. You begin to understand why this city, built on sand, survived. Why it thrived. It wasn't just the gold. It was the salt, the weightless wealth that moved mountains of thought, one slab at a time. And maybe, just maybe, it still lingers in the air, in the quiet moments between each dry, scratchy turn of the page. You're blinking against the glare of midday sun, the light reflecting off sand and whitewashed walls like a mirror aimed at your eyes. There's a commotion in the plaza. Traders and scribes alike have abandoned their usual low murmurs in favor of hushed excitement. Something, or someone, has arrived. You follow the flow of bodies toward the mosque, elbow to elbow with fishmongers and fortune-tellers. The name ripples through the crowd like wind in dry grass, Mansa Musa. You catch it again, this time shouted with reverence. He's here! Or rather, he was here. Because while the man himself isn't stepping off a camel right now, his shadow still stretches across the centuries of Timbuktu's story. In fact, you quickly learn that his pilgrimage, undertaken years before your dreamy visit, still echoes in everything around you. The gold. The books. The very idea that Timbuktu mattered. Historians still argue whether his journey in 1324 was primarily religious or political theater. Either way, it worked. Musa set off from Mali to Mecca with a caravan so extravagant it practically broke Cairo's economy. Tens of thousands of attendants. Hundreds of camels. So much gold he triggered inflation in North Africa. That's not an exaggeration, it actually devalued currency across cities for over a decade. Imagine being so rich, your road trip causes a financial crisis. And it wasn't just gold he spread. It was curiosity. Questions. When Musa stopped in Cairo and Alexandria, he left more than coins behind. He left scholars buzzing about faraway land where kings were literate, libraries were massive, and mosques towered like mountains. One Egyptian chronicler wrote of Musa as if he were a myth made flesh. That buzz traveled, and it settled in Timbuktu like a seed in fertile sand. After Musa returned to Mali, the kingdom funneled gold into construction projects, mosques, madrasas, and eventually, scribal guilds. You're standing beside one now, Jingariber Mosque, its minaret rising from the ground like a sandcastle carved by divine hands. It was built during Musa's reign, its bricks molded from clay, straw, and sheer ambition. You trail your fingers along the cool wall. The surface is rough, sun-baked, but steady. You wonder how many pilgrims before you did the same. Inside, the air shifts. Cooler. Quieter. Students sit in tight rows, swaying as they recite texts, poetry, scripture, even medical treatises. A man in indigo robes watches them like a hawk. He's the alim, head scholar. His voice is soft, but carries. He quotes Ibn Khaldun. Then he quotes a local proverb about camels refusing to kneel before arrogant riders. His students laugh. You find yourself smiling too. Outside, you're handed a date stuffed with honey and nuts. It's sticky, sweet, and frankly, delicious. You don't ask who paid for it. You already know. The legacy of Musa isn't just in the stones and scrolls. It's in these small moments of generosity, these glances exchanged across time where one ruler's gold bought someone else's dream. In a side alley, you spot a mural, Musa on a camel, holding a book in one hand and a coin in the other. It's an artistic liberty, sure, but it rings true. Timbuktu became a book lover's dream because its richest king wasn't afraid to dream bigger. And now you sit on a rooftop, the muezzins call curling like incense through the dusk. The gold isn't flashing in the streets anymore, it's tucked between pages. Hidden in ink, but it's there. You wake early again, not because of noise, but because of that strange, charged stillness just before the city exhales. There's something different in the air today, more than dust and prayer. Word is spreading fast. A scholar from the east has arrived. You follow the murmurs through winding alleys. People are already gathering, peeking through lattice windows and behind market stalls. Everyone wants a look at the new arrival, this man who's traveled across deserts and empires, not for gold or trade, but for words. He enters without fanfare. No jeweled turban, no armed guards. Just a bundle of worn manuscripts, a long robe faded by sun, and a slow, deliberate gait that somehow commands more respect than a sultan's parade. His name? Ahmad ibn Uthman al-Khanami, or maybe it was al-Maghribi. Historians still argue whether such men were individuals or composites, travelers whose identities blurred in the sands of storytelling. But one thing's for sure, this scholar isn't just visiting. He's here to stay. You trail him through the market, where he trades a rare Eastern medical manuscript for a basket of ink jars and sheaves of vellum. No one questions the price. Here in Timbuktu, knowledge is its own currency, and his accent alone makes him a minor celebrity. By midday, he's already gathered a circle of eager students in a shaded courtyard. He reads aloud, not from the Quran this time, but from Aristotle. In Arabic, annotated with footnotes from Persian doctors and Andalusian poets. The kids are spellbound. So are the elders. You are, too. And the best part? He doesn't just teach from his own texts. He studies theirs. He pores over Songhai commentaries. He asks pointed questions about Fulani folklore. He argues gently, but firmly, with the local imam about astronomy versus astrology. His joy is infectious. He's not just here to teach. He's here to learn. You lean against a cracked wall, watching the sun stripe the floor through woven matting. A boy beside you scribbles notes on a scrap of parchment. His handwriting's a mess. His face is glowing. Later that night, you catch a quiet moment with the scholar. He's sitting on a low stool, legs crossed, sipping warm sour milk and reading by oil lamp. The manuscript is a commentary on Islamic jurisprudence, but you notice a different book beneath it, something smaller, handwritten, with drawings of plants and animals. He sees you looking. Smiles. It's a gift from a student, he says, lifting the book gently. She wanted to prove that even desert herbs have logic. You raise your brows. She? He chuckles. Of course. You think knowledge only comes in beards? You laugh, softly, sleepily. The light flickers. The air smells of ink and clove smoke. And you realize, this city didn't become great because of one culture or language or tradition. It became great because people kept showing up with new ideas, and were welcomed. Even today, that hospitality lingers in the walls. Even today, the books still whisper. You wake to the clatter of baskets and the murmur of haggling voices. Morning in Timbuktu doesn't begin with silence, it begins with trade. You stretch, blink dust from your eyes, and step into a city that smells like cumin, parchment, roasted barley, and just a hint of dried fish. Always dried fish. You wander through the marketplace, past stalls with jars of honey, salt blocks, indigo dye, and leather sandals shaped like curled leaves. But today, your attention is drawn not to goods, but to conversations. Because here, ideas are traded just as easily as goods. Two old men argue over a line of Sufi poetry, one claiming it speaks of divine surrender, the other insisting it refers to actual wine. Neither backs down. Both quote stanzas by heart. A fishmonger nearby rolls her eyes, fillets a catfish with surgical precision, and mutters the correct interpretation under her breath. You buy her last fish out of sheer admiration. Just past her stall, you see another vendor, this one selling books. Not from a shop, but a faded reed mat. His stock, 10 manuscripts, 2 scrolls, and a single loose page protected under glass. He sells them like apples. One customer buys an entire treatise on lunar cycles in exchange for 4 slabs of salt and a bag of cola nuts. Another barters with a jar of camel oil and a kiss on the seller's cheek. The seller laughs. Only because you remembered my birthday. The books themselves are a marvel. bound in stitched leather, filled with calligraphy that swirls like wind over dunes. Some are marked with the fingerprints of children. Others bear thumbprints next to disputed passages, tiny, quiet signs of long-forgotten arguments. You open one and find the scent of rose water trapped between the pages. Someone cared enough to perfume the margin notes. Historians still debate whether Timbuktu's marketplace rivaled that of Fez or Damascus in intellectual rigor, but one thing's undeniable: here, knowledge lives in public. It is not hidden behind walls or locked in ivory towers. It is debated over flatbread, whispered during prayer, scribbled into ledgers alongside fish weights and tax receipts. You pause at a small stall offering oil for manuscript preservation. It's a pungent mix, part clove, part resin, part mystery. The vendor, a wiry woman with gold teeth and sharper wit, promises it keeps both worms and illiteracy away. You buy a vial and she throws in a proverb: the mouth that forgets to speak wisdom, soon forgets to eat. You tuck it away, half amused and half in awe. As the day stretches on, the market becomes louder. Scholars debate beneath shaded awnings. Scribes trade scraps of parchment like currency. Even children get in on the act, selling rhyme verses for small coins or fruit. One girl tugs your sleeve and recites a poem about donkeys and dreams. You give her your last date. And just like that, you feel it, not just see it, not just hear it, but feel it. This isn't just a market. It's an ecosystem of thought. A breathing, arguing, laughing organism where theology and fish oil share the same bench. Where poetry is pinned to the same stall as camel saddles. You realize you haven't spoken in hours, not because you're tired, but because there's nothing to add. Everything's being said already, more beautifully than you could. So you simply walk, absorbing the rhythm of it all. The spice-scented words. The musical bartering. The quiet reverence for ink and idea. And as the sun begins to dip and shadows stretch long across the square, you pass one final vendor. He's asleep. His books are not. They sit open, fluttering gently in the breeze, whispering softly to each other. You tiptoe past, not daring to interrupt. You find yourself standing before a mud brick doorway carved in gentle arches, its frame etched with sun-faded geometric patterns. There's no sign above it, no bells or official plaque, just a worn wooden door slightly ajar. You step inside, and the scent hits you first. Old paper, worn leather, dust, and something else, jasmine, maybe? The air is heavier here, cooler too, and filled with a kind of sacred hush you usually only find in temples or libraries built into mountains. This isn't a public building. It's a home. Or rather, a library that just happens to be someone's house. You pad quietly across the clay floor, guided by slivers of sunlight that cut through the shuttered windows. Stacked along the walls are manuscripts. Not shelves, stacks. Layered high, tied in bundles, wrapped in goatskin, sorted by subject and thickness and whimsy. In this room alone, you count at least 200 books. And that's just the front room. A man appears from the back, tall, gentle-eyed, with smudges of ink on his fingertips. He doesn't look surprised to see you. Just amused. He waves you in and offers a small bowl of sweetened hibiscus tea. You sip, and the stories begin. This is one of many private libraries in Timbuktu. Dozens of families here, you learn, are guardians of knowledge passed down through generations. Some collections began with a single book, a Quran, maybe, or a medical scroll. Others were born from marriages, trade deals, or pilgrimages. Over time, they grew into miniature universities. And now they're priceless. Historians still debate how many manuscripts once lived in these homes. Some claim hundreds of thousands, others say tens of thousands at best. But the truth is, even a single library like this, hidden behind a humble door, could outmatch entire institutions in medieval Europe. These families didn't just hoard books. They lived with them, slept beside them, passed them down like heirlooms, or secrets. You're invited to touch one, gently. It's wrapped in indigo-dyed linen, soft with age. You unfold it, revealing a treatise on jurisprudence, written in flowing Arabic script, margins filled with footnotes, diagrams. At the bottom, a short line in Songhai, copied for my son, to guide him if I die. You have to look away for a moment. Later, the owner shows you a ledger. It's not for money, but for borrowing. He keeps track of who's read what, when it was returned, and whether the reader added margin notes. One entry stands out, a book read by 5 generations, each adding something. You run your fingers down the faded signatures like they're beads on a rosary. Then you're led deeper into the house. A small room, cool, dark, and lined with boxes. Chests. Leather-bound trunks sealed with wax. Some of them haven't been opened in decades, not out of neglect, but reverence. They're waiting for the right hands, the right moment, the right question. You ask why these books aren't in a public archive. The answer is soft, but firm, because not all knowledge wants to be seen by strangers. You nod. Somehow, you understand. There's a manuscript here, one the man opens just for you. It's a commentary on astronomy, filled with symbols and strange sketches, some of planets, some of creatures you've never seen. There's a star map drawn in golden ink, and a line scrawled near the top reads, "Let the sky be your teacher." You close the book gently. The room seems to exhale. Back outside, the sun has shifted. You look over your shoulder at the humble doorway, half hidden by the clay wall and climbing vines. You'd walk right past it if you didn't know better. And that's the thing. In Timbuktu, the greatest libraries weren't always built in stone. Sometimes, they were built in silence. In patience. In homes where wisdom whispered louder than gold ever could. By now, your feet are coated in dust, your shoulders sunburned just enough to make you feel like a local, and your ears still ringing faintly from the call to prayer. You've seen marketplaces of salt, gold, and books. You've wandered into home libraries where knowledge is cherished like a sleeping child. But now you're going somewhere quieter. A school. Not the kind you'd recognize. No rows of desks, no chalkboards, no bells ringing between periods. Instead, you're led into a courtyard enclosed by walls of baked earth, their edges rounded by wind and time. It's barely more than a rectangle of shade, dappled with sunlight filtering through palm mats overhead. There are no chairs. Just reed mats and a dozen children cross-legged in silence. At the center sits a man whose beard is going gray and whose voice could lull a dust storm to sleep. He's reciting a passage, slow and rhythmic. The students echo it back, not as a chant but as a kind of meditation. The words ripple outward in waves, Arabic phrases laced with meaning, wrapped around lessons in law, ethics, and the cosmos. You listen closely. He's quoting Al-Ghazali, and pausing to explain how a good heart is better than a sharp mind. The children nod like it's obvious. One boy is only 5 years old. His voice is high, uncertain. But he doesn't stop. The others wait patiently for him to catch up. There's no teasing, no rolling of eyes. This isn't a competition. It's a chorus. The teacher pauses, points to the sky. A hawk circles lazily above, gliding between the minarets. That, he says, is how knowledge should move. Silent, graceful, always circling truth. You're charmed. You're also mildly jealous. Later, he holds up a worn board. It's coated in white clay and inked with dark script. A wooden tablet, really, Lou. The child beside him washes it clean with a handful of sand and begins again. There are no notebooks, no pencils, and barely any paper. Just repetition. Memory. Clay, ink, sand. Historians still debate how effective this system was compared to Western methods. But it's hard to argue with students who can recite hundreds of pages by heart, who treat books not as objects but as companions. There's a discipline here that feels more like devotion than schooling. You spot a young girl copying a passage with sharp focus. Her handwriting is better than most adults you know. She catches your glance and raises an eyebrow. "Do you want to learn?" she asks, half mocking. You nod. She smiles, writes something in the sand beside you, then erases it before you can read. "Lesson 1, she whispers. "Pay attention." By midday, the children break for tea and flatbread. A bowl of dates is passed around. You join the teacher under a shade tree. He tells you that the school isn't just for children. Some students are in their 30s. Some are elders. One student, he says, has been studying the same verse for 20 years, and insists he's only just beginning to understand it. You ask if the school has a name. He shrugs. The name changes. The learning doesn't. There are no official school buildings in Timbuktu's golden age, not the way you might expect. But there are dozens of these courtyards. Some under trees, some beside mosques, some in the back of spice shops. Anywhere can be a classroom. All you need is a teacher, a student, and the hunger to know. A donkey brays outside. A child laughs. A bird lands on the edge of a clay tablet and hops once, twice, as if trying to join the lesson. And you sit back, the air thick with sunlight and syllables, and think, this might be the most beautiful school you've ever seen. You return to the city's edge at twilight, your sandals coated in red grit, your hands still faintly smelling of hibiscus and ink. The light softens. Shadows lengthen. And now, you're heading somewhere sacred. Not a mosque this time. A workshop. It's tucked between a tannery and a home that sells lemon spice tea. From the outside, it looks like nothing. A rectangle of dried mud and frayed reed mats. But step inside, and it's another world. The air is warm with the scent of burning acacia and wet charcoal. A single oil lamp glows like a watchful eye. You're in a scriptorium. And it's alive. A young man crouches by a pile of indigo-stained cloth, scraping parchment with a curved blade. His fingers are dyed blue. Another sits at a bench, grinding pigments into powder, clove, hibiscus, saffron, and some ingredient you can't identify that smells like roasted cinnamon and smoke. The colors don't just shimmer, they hum. And at the far end of the room, beneath a low ceiling blackened with soot, an older scribe is bent over a manuscript. You lean in. The text is immaculate, sharp, elegant Arabic script. Above it, delicate geometric designs unfurl like flowers. Below it, faint drawings, a physician treating a fever, a map of the Nile's curve, a dragon curled in a corner like a tired cat. Every page here is a universe. Every penstroke, an act of devotion. He pauses, dips his reed pen into the ink pot, flicks his wrist to clear the excess, writes another line with a patience so perfect you forget to breathe. You ask him how long it takes to finish one book. He shrugs. A week. A month. A year. Depends if the muse behaves. He's joking. Kind of. Nearby, a girl about 12 is tasked with preparing the covers, pressing boiled leather into wooden boards, drying them with warm sand. She hums softly as she works, unaware that she's doing something that once took entire medieval guilds to accomplish. She lifts a finished book to show you. The cover is dark red, the stitching near invisible, the title inked in a silver so fine you nearly miss it. But the inside, that's where the real treasure is. Tiny annotations crowd the margins. Some serious, debates on legal theory. Some sweet, prayers for good weather. One just says, don't lend this to Hamid. He never returns things. You laugh. Historians still argue whether these manuscripts were purely scholarly or also a little personal. The truth? They were both. These books weren't made for display. They were made to live, to be carried, debated, rewritten, lost and found again. You reach out to touch one, but the girl stops you. Wait, she says, smell first. You lift the book to your nose and inhale. Smoke, spice, dried rose petals, ash. It smells like age, like memory. The scribe calls out to you. He's smiling now, amused at your wide eyes. You know, he says, our inks don't just mark pages. They mark people. Once you hold a book, it knows your hands. You believe him. Before you leave, the girl offers you a slip of parchment with a proverb written in practiced calligraphy. Words are smoke, unless they're written in fire. You fold it into your pocket and step back into the cooling evening, where the air now carries a faint tang of charcoal and cloves. Somewhere behind you, another pen dips into ink. The city breathes. The books breathe. And you're starting to understand that Timbuktu was never just a place for books. It was a place where books were born, one slow, sacred stroke at a time. The morning starts quieter than usual. No market shouts, no clanging pots, just birdsong and the occasional bray of a donkey. You stretch, expecting another day of wandering dusty alleys and admiring manuscripts. But today, you're going somewhere far more elusive. Behind the books. Behind the calligraphy. Behind the stories. Today, you meet the women. Not in the streets, necessarily. Not in the schools or marketplaces, at least not openly. But behind the woven palm leaf screens of certain houses, especially the ones with too many ink pots and too few sons, you find them. You're led by a girl named Zainab, who is maybe 14, maybe 20. It's hard to tell when someone moves like they're older than the wind. She greets you with a smile that's half amusement, half warning. This way, she says. But no loud questions. Or loud anything. The house she leads you into smells of incense and limes. The floor is cool. On a low platform by the window, 3 women sit with scrolls in their laps, not whispering, not hiding, just working. One copies a legal text, the second one edits a medical recipe, and the third? She's writing a poem. You sit beside them, unsure whether to be amazed or embarrassed. One of them, a middle-aged woman with gold-threaded cuffs, glances sideways at you and asks, "Do you think we weren't here?" You stammer something. She grins. Historians usually do. It's true. Historians still argue whether women in Timbuktu were formally allowed to be scholars. The truth seems to depend on where you look. Official titles? Rare. But footprints? Everywhere. Margin notes, dedications, entire libraries pass through maternal lines. One scholar from the 16th century left a note in his will, "To my daughter Fatima, who debates like a lion and forgets nothing I teach." Zainab shows you a thick volume, its leather cover embossed with a sunburst. The title is a treatise on dream interpretation, but the marginalia? That's where things get interesting. Dozens of notes in different hands, mostly women, commenting on dreams they'd had. Some mystical, some funny, some deeply, shockingly precise. One reads, "Last night I dreamt my husband apologized." A fantasy indeed. Another, "In the third dream of the new moon, a fish spoke to me. I must avoid sweet things today." You turn the page. More notes. Someone has drawn a tiny eye in the corner of every section about betrayal. Someone else has rewritten an entire passage in Songhai beside the Arabic, with a small smiley face in the corner. You ask Zainab who wrote all these. "All of us," she says. "Over time." You look up. The 3 women haven't stopped writing. One is now arguing, softly, with the others about a metaphor involving desert winds and heartbreak. They ask what you think. You're startled to be included. You say something clumsy. They nod like you've given them a riddle to solve. One of them writes it down. You realize that in this hidden corner of the city, the books aren't just sacred, they're alive. The margins breathe. The footnotes flirt. The ink remembers. And while the world outside might forget the names of the women behind these pages, the books do not. Before you go, Zainab presses something into your hand. A page. Old, but well kept. A poem, and signed. "I write so I do not disappear. I write so my daughters remember. Even if they never read this." You step back into the sunlight, blinking. Somewhere behind you, a pen scratches softly against parchment. The women are still writing. The streets are busier today, more chatter, more robes swishing past, more hands clutching manuscripts like they're worth their weight in sapphires. Something is happening. You hear snippets as you walk. "He arrived last night, from Cairo, no, Damascus," someone even whispers, "Baghdad." You trail the crowd through winding lanes until you reach an open courtyard shaded by date palms and awnings woven from goat hair. There's no podium, no formality. Just 2 men sitting cross-legged on opposite sides of a carpet, books stacked around them like chess pieces. You recognize one of them, Timbuktu's own. The other? His accent, his robes, the way he sharpens his ink quill with the intensity of a falcon, all tell you he's not from around here. A debate is beginning. The topic? Whether God's will is absolute, or whether reason plays a role in divine justice. Light, casual stuff. You settle in beside a group of students whispering excitedly. One offers you a boiled peanut. "The last time someone from Egypt came," he murmurs, "they debated for 3 days." The speakers begin. Their voices are calm, even musical, the cadence rising and falling like waves. Each argument is supported by quotations from the Quran, then from Hadith, then from classical philosophers, Al-Farabi, Ibn Rushd, Aristotle. The Timbuktu scholar counters with references from local commentaries you've never heard of. The visitor raises an eyebrow, intrigued. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu ever truly rivaled the great universities of Cairo, Kairouan, or even Cordoba. But as you watch this verbal sparring match, surrounded by butchers, fishwives, and children cross-legged in the dirt, all following along, you begin to understand, it wasn't about prestige. It was about access. Here, knowledge doesn't live in ivory towers. It's debated in open courtyards, beside fruit vendors and basket weavers, by men and women alike. No one shushes the children. No one tells the peanut vendor to move. Everyone has a right to listen, and perhaps, to answer. The debate heats up. The visiting scholar quotes a line from a Persian mystic. The local scholar nods, then responds with a Wolof proverb about water knowing no borders. Someone in the crowd chuckles. Another claps. You catch yourself smiling. This isn't a performance. It's a dialogue. A living, breathing engine of thought. During a short break, students crowd the debaters with questions. Some are nervous, others bold. One girl demands to know if infinity is an actual number. Both scholars laugh, and then give her two different answers. Later, as dust curls around the courtyard like a shawl, you speak to a young man copying notes onto folded parchment. His handwriting is immaculate. He tells you this debate will be written down, stored, and eventually added to the city's scholarly archives. But who decides who won, you ask? He grins. No one. That's the point. As the crowd disperses, you catch a final glimpse of the two scholars sharing tea, heads bowed together over a manuscript. Not adversaries. Colleagues. And you realize, Timbuktu wasn't just a place where books were made. It was a place where ideas met, clashed, danced, and braided themselves into something new. You head home under a sky pricked with stars. Somewhere behind you, the debate continues in softer voices. Maybe it will go on until morning. In Timbuktu, some questions aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be shared. You wake before dawn to a knock at the door. A boy stands outside, breathless, eyes wide, holding a bundle wrapped in indigo cloth. They're leaving, he says. You don't need to ask who. You grab your sandals and follow him through narrow alleys lit only by the soft glow of oil lamps. The city still sleeps, but just beyond its walls, the desert stirs. Camels kneel in the sand, their hooves kicking up tiny clouds. Men move quickly but quietly, loading boxes, bundles, and something far more precious than salt or gold. Books! Wrapped, stacked, hidden in sacks of grain. Tied beneath saddles. Slipped into hollowed-out gourds. You blink, still groggy, and count nearly 30 camels, each bearing more than just weight. They carry the lifeblood of Timbuktu's knowledge, smuggled across the Sahara like treasure. You approach a man tightening the rope around his camel's load. He eyes you cautiously, then nods. Scholars in Walata want these, he says. And Kano. And Gadams. And Fez. You ask why they're moving the books at night. He hesitates, then gestures eastward. Because not everyone values books the way we do. Historians still debate the extent of book smuggling from Timbuktu, whether it was constant, organized, or a sporadic act of desperation. But standing here, watching these caravans move out like ghosts, you see that it's all three. Some scholars leave voluntarily, seeking students in far-off lands. Others flee wars, taxation, or rival empires who think burning a library is the same as conquering it. Some simply want to share what they know before it's forgotten. You walk with the caravan as it begins to move. Slowly, rhythmically. Each step deliberate. The air smells of leather and mint leaves, rubbed on camel legs to keep flies away. The only sound is the creak of rope, the crunch of sand, and the faint rustle of pages. One camel carries nothing but scrolls, bundled and bound so tightly they look like firewood. The boy beside you points. That one's the medical texts, he says. They go to Takeda. They still remember how to use them. Another carries what looks like an ordinary sack of millet. But inside is a bundle of astrology charts, lunar calendars, and diagrams of eclipses sketched in silver ink. You ask how they protect such delicate cargo. The answer surprises you. With prayer, the boy says. And very good wrapping. Later, you stop to rest beside a cook fire. One of the traders unwraps a book for a quick check. It's poetry, verses from the 10th century, hand-copied with delicate flourishes. A man beside you recites a line under his breath. The desert takes, the desert gives. He doesn't explain it. He doesn't need to. You help wrap the book again, sliding it gently into a carved wooden box. You notice a small inscription inside the lid. For the reader I will never meet. That stays with you. As the sun finally rises, casting pink light across the dunes, the caravan crests a hill and disappears into the wide open silence. No flag. No farewell. Just footprints in the sand, fading already. You walk back slowly, the wind at your back, and think, this was never just a city. It was a fountain. Knowledge didn't pool here, it flowed. And when the world grew too loud, too violent, or too careless, it slipped away on camelback. Still alive. Still breathing. Still moving. You return to the city by early afternoon, feet sore, mouth dry, head full of verses you don't fully understand but somehow don't want to forget. Timbuktu feels different after watching knowledge ride off into the sand. It feels quieter, but not emptier, because not everything needs to travel to be shared. You're in a courtyard shaded by neem trees, sipping bright red bissap tea that puckers your cheeks with its tartness. Around you, men and women of all ages sit cross-legged, hunched over palm leaf fans and loose scraps of parchment. The topic today? The stars. You didn't know Timbuktu had astronomers. But of course it does. One elder sits at the center, drawing constellations in the sand with a stick. Orion. Scorpius. Aljabar. He connects the dots with fluid movements, then stands and gestures to the sky, even though it's midday. They move, he says, but they return. Just like knowledge. Someone nearby is reading aloud from a text written in Arabic. It's about calculating lunar cycles, determining the direction of prayer, predicting eclipses. You learn that local scholars had not only charted star patterns, they debated them, compared them to Greek theories, corrected earlier texts, made predictions without the use of telescopes or fancy brass tools. One child raises his hand. What if the stars lie? Everyone laughs. A scholar replies, they never lie. They just don't always speak our language. Then come the math problems. But not the kind that live in dusty textbooks. These are real. How far a caravan might travel before the moon wanes, how much gold equals 3 bundles of salt during a waning gibbous, how to measure a mosque shadow at noon to check your compass. The students work through equations scratched into clay tablets and smoothed away with their palms. No calculators. No notebooks. Just minds sharpened like spear tips. And the tea? Constantly refilled. You shift closer to a man in his 30s with twinkling eyes and ink-stained fingers. He's copying a treatise from the 11th century, something from Andalusia, translated twice before it ever arrived in this courtyard. You ask what it's about. He shrugs. The stars. The soul. Same thing. You watch his pen move. The ink, you learn, is homemade, a mix of date syrup, charcoal, and dried tamarind bark. It smells faintly like earth after rain. Historians still debate how advanced West African astronomy truly was, whether it matched Baghdad or merely adapted local cosmology. But here, the argument feels irrelevant. It's not about competition. It's about connection. The stars aren't just numbers, they're teachers. One scholar taps his page. We are dust, he says, but even dust reflects light. Someone plays a soft melody on a wooden flute. Children hum along, tracing imaginary stars in the sand with their fingers. You lay back, staring up at the pale blue sky, imagining it full of tiny pinholes leaking secrets into the world. As the day drifts into late afternoon, a final verse is read aloud. Not religious, not academic, just beautiful. The moon taught me patience. The sun taught me warmth. But it was the stars who taught me how to wait in darkness. No one applauds. They just nod. And in that quiet moment, you realize something. Knowledge here isn't always loud or grand. Sometimes, it sits cross-legged in a courtyard, wrapped in tea steam and starlight, humming softly while it waits to be passed on. You're halfway through your morning bread when you hear the braying. At first, you think it's just another market donkey, maybe protesting the weight of a salt slab or the indignity of hauling fish oil under the Sahel sun. But then you see them, 5 donkeys, each led by a boy barely taller than the bundles tied to their backs. And those bundles? Books! You blink. Surely not. But no, those woven saddlebags are bulging with manuscripts, carefully wrapped in dyed cloth, tied at the corners with ribbons of dried palm. A procession of donkeys, clip-clopping through Timbuktu like they're the stars of a royal parade. You ask one of the boys where they're going. To the scholars on the east side, he says, beaming. They needed references for a debate. Algebra and theology. You glance at the donkeys. Their ears twitch. One sneezes. None look particularly invested in algebra. But apparently, they're very much part of the system. In fact, you soon learn that these animals are trusted book couriers, not just pack mules, but honored members of Timbuktu's intellectual machine. Families raise and train them specifically for this purpose. They're taught which alleyways to avoid, which courtyards to stop in, and, according to some, how to wait patiently while a manuscript is being copied. One boy claims his donkey can recognize the smell of ink and gets excited around libraries. You're skeptical. until you see a donkey trot ahead of its handler and stop, unprompted, at the doorway of a scribe's house. Okay, maybe you're slightly convinced. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or more of a quirky regional phenomenon. Some dismiss it as exaggerated folklore, others swear by traveler journals from the era that describe whole caravans of donkeys delivering scholarly works across districts. Either way, the respect is real. You visit a small stable near the city's edge. Inside, a teenage girl is brushing one of the book donkeys with a bundle of dry reeds. She hums while she works. The walls are lined with shelves, not for books, but for bundles of rags, oilcloths, and spare cords. She points to a brass bell hanging by the door. That's for emergencies, she explains. If a delivery is late, or if someone thinks their donkey has been cursed. You raise an eyebrow. She nods solemnly. Some people get very emotional about their manuscripts. Later, you see a donkey wearing a small amulet around its neck. It's not decorative, it's protective. A tiny prayer for safe passage, written on paper, wrapped in leather, and tied with twine. You run your finger along it and feel the indent of words. Even animals here are blessed in the name of knowledge. And why not? These humble creatures move like silent librarians across the city, carrying law texts, poetry, scientific theories, and recipes for remedies you can't pronounce. They don't read the pages, but they preserve them. They don't argue points, but they deliver the arguments. They are, quite literally, the legs of learning. As the sun sinks low and the donkeys return, empty saddlebags swaying, you watch one nudge a young boy in the ribs, impatient for its dinner. The boy laughs, feeds it a carrot, and whispers, "Good job today, Professor." You chuckle. Because in a city where everyone from a fishmonger to a child recites philosophy, maybe even the donkeys earn their degrees. The sun sits high, baking the city into a shimmer. You've taken refuge in an alley barely wide enough for two people to pass without brushing shoulders. It's shaded, quiet, and for the first time today, oddly beautiful. Because all along the earthen walls, something glows. Calligraphy. Not painted haphazardly or scrawled in haste, but artfully brushed in rich pigments, deep blue, soft ochre, and even flashes of gold leaf that catch the light like tiny suns. Verses from the Quran dance beside lines of Sufi poetry. Proverbs spiral into rosettes. A quote from Ibn Khaldun blooms like a flower at eye level. He who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat its dust. It's street art, but sacred. Scholars say Islamic art traditionally avoids figural imagery. So in Timbuktu, language became the image. Here, letters are decoration, declaration, and devotion all at once. You trace a line of elegant script with your eyes, your finger hovering just above the paint, not daring to touch. A man in a faded red turban passes behind you. He chuckles. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" he asks, gesturing to the wall like it's a portrait. "We call her the verse of shadows. She keeps cool better than any roof." You learn that these murals aren't commissioned by kings or patrons. They're the work of scholar artists, students, and even wandering poets with brushes tucked into their belts. Every few weeks, the alley changes. New quotes are added, old ones repainted. Layers of meaning piled like strata in a desert cliff. You find one near the ground in a child's handwriting. "My father says every letter is a seed." You step back, letting the wall breathe. Further down, an entire passage from Rumi winds around a corner. Don't you know yet? It is your light that lights the world. You stop. That one lingers. So does the image of a tiny lizard climbing over the word light, casting a flickering shadow that dances like candle flame. Historians still argue how much of Timbuktu's public decoration was planned versus spontaneous. Some say there were specific guilds for such work. Others claim the tradition was more informal, a way for scholars to mark territory, ideas, or even birthdays. One wall bears a peculiar line written upside down. "This is for the sky to read." It makes you laugh, softly. At a nearby cafe, really just a shaded nook with 3 stools and a clay teapot, you speak to an older man who remembers painting walls with his father. He taps the side of his head. "I couldn't memorize, so I painted. The verses stuck better that way." You sip your tea slowly, watching 2 girls with brushes add new lines near the top of a fresh wall. They argue over phrasing, pause to laugh, then continue. Their paint smells of crushed tamarind and egg yolk, an old technique, passed down like family recipes. And it isn't just Arabic. You see Songhai, Tamashek, even occasional French script layered like whispers across the bricks. Timbuktu speaks in every tongue it has ever welcomed. Before you leave the alley, you notice one more message, half-faded and nearly lost beneath layers of newer work. If you forget me, look at the walls. You turn once more and realize you're surrounded. The city is a book. Every wall a page. Every letter a breath. And long after the debates fade and the scholars move on, these quiet alleys still speak. Not loudly, but beautifully. You wake to the rustle of parchment. Not the grand, bound tomes of scriptoriums or the elegant scrolls tucked into leather pouches, but something far humbler, scraps. Notes. Fragments. You follow the sound down a side street to a stall shaded with fraying cloth and guarded by a sleepy goat. The vendor is sorting paper. Not selling it. Sorting it. You stand quietly, watching. He weighs one sheet between his fingers. Frowns. Taps it against his palm. Sniffs it. Finally, he places it gently in a wooden box marked with a single word, Egypt. You ask what he's doing. Organizing paper, he says. By origin. By thickness. By smell. Right. Of course. And in Timbuktu, that's not unusual. You soon learn that paper here is as precious as the knowledge written on it. Imported, protected, and sometimes even hoarded. Historians still argue how much of the city's paper came from abroad. Some say Cairo was the main source. Others insist it came through trade with Morocco, Andalusia, even India. But all agree on one thing. Paper was priceless. You visit a scholar's home where every single sheet is stored in a wooden chest, each page laid flat between layers of dried leaves to keep insects away. Another man keeps his stash in pottery jars sealed with beeswax. When he opens one to show you, the scent of dried figs and cloves escapes like perfume. You ask how much paper costs. The answer, more than a goat. Less than a daughter. Depends who you ask. You laugh. Then pause. He's not joking. The reality is stunning. One manuscript could take months to write, and more than half the cost came from the pages themselves. Every inch mattered. Margins were tight. Ink was carefully rationed. Mistakes were scratched out and rewritten so many times that some pages look like woven fabric, stories layered like sediment. And when paper ran out, scribes got creative. You see Quranic verses etched into wood boards, math formulas copied onto smooth stones, recipes inscribed on old leather scraps. One treatise on weather patterns is scrawled in charcoal on flattened bark. Nothing was wasted. You meet a woman who's made a career out of repairing manuscripts. She works with tweezers, fish glue, and dried banana fiber. Watching her restore a torn corner is like watching surgery. She hums while she works, and when she finishes, she holds the page up to the light like a window. It shines faintly golden. She tells you that during paper shortages, families would donate clothing, linen, silk, even old turbans, to be pulped and reused. One poem survives on the remains of a wedding gown. Later, you find yourself in a shop that does nothing but make paper. The floor is damp with pulp water. Trays line the shelves like freshly baked bread. A boy stirs a vat with a wooden paddle, the slurry thick and gray. You lean in to read a scrap on the wall. To write is to give shape to silence. To make silence, you must first prepare the page. You don't forget that one. Before you leave, the vendor offers you a sliver of finished parchment. It's so thin you can see your own shadow through it. On one corner, someone has already begun a line of script. It ends abruptly, just 2 words. Begin here. And you realize that in Timbuktu, paper wasn't just a vessel for thought. It was the thought. Every sheet a silent gamble. Every book a small miracle of material, patience, and ink. It's nearly midnight when you find yourself inside one of the older libraries, a squat, stone-walled room lit only by a single oil lamp that flickers like it's shy. You shouldn't be here, technically. But the librarian waved you in with a conspiratorial smile and whispered, "Want to see the fun pages?" You assumed she meant illuminated manuscripts or riddles. You were wrong. Because what she pulls out from the bottom of a cedar chest is not bound in polished leather or wrapped with perfumed linen. It's bundled in old cloth, tied tightly with dry grass string, and sealed with something. A prayer bead? A chicken feather? She unwraps it slowly, reverently. Inside are scraps, scrolls, full pages, and notes crammed into margins like messages in bottles. You hold one up. It reads, "To the thief who took this, may your fingers forget the alphabet." Another page. If you borrow this and don't return it, may your goats bear no milk and your children only ask impossible questions. You laugh, too loud. The librarian grins. These, she says, are the marginalia of the annoyed. Turns out, Timbuktu's scholars were deeply human. They didn't just record lofty theorems or divine philosophy. They doodled. They joked. They cursed, with flair. Historians still argue how widespread this practice was. Some say it was informal, others believe certain libraries encouraged it, both as entertainment and as deterrent. One page holds a drawing of what appears to be a beetle balancing a stack of books. Next to it, this is bakery. He carries more than you. Another scroll has tiny repeated phrases scratched into the margin. You squint. It says, I am so tired. Why is this book so long? Written 30 times. But then you find something else. A square of parchment with strange diagrams, part geometric, part abstract. You assume it's math, until the librarian leans over and whispers, it's a spell. You glance up. She nods. Protection. Scholars were clever. They wrote knowledge in the open, and hid other things in the corners. She shows you a manuscript with protective verses slipped into the margins, prayers to keep fire away. Or rain. Or envy. One note reads simply, this book belongs to God. And also Fatima. Touch it wrong and see what happens. You open another and find notes scribbled upside down, lists of dreams, names of the dead, tally marks that seem to follow no pattern. A different page bears a crude love poem written in between legal commentary. Her eyes debate me more than any jurist. You ask if anyone ever erased these. The librarian laughs. Why would we erase the soul of the book? She leans in and adds, more quietly, sometimes those margins are all we have left. The original text fades. But someone's bored thought? Their warning? That survives. You help her wrap the bundle again, a strange quiet settling over the room. Not reverence exactly. More like respect. Because these weren't just notes. They were echoes. Ghosts with ink-stained fingers. Students trying to remember. Scribes too tired to keep their sarcasm silent. Readers who loved something so much they had to write back. You leave the library just before dawn, the streets soft with blue light. In your pocket is a slip of parchment the librarian let you keep. It says, if you read this, you owe me tea. You smile. You'll bring her hibiscus. And maybe, if you're lucky, she'll let you read the spells again. You wake to laughter. Not the raucous kind, but something softer, measured, layered with many accents and cadences, the sort of laughter that follows a shared joke in many languages at once. You're in a courtyard shaded by wide awnings, where a group of people gather around a low table piled high with flatbread, dates, small ceramic cups, and books. Lots of books. Some are bound in red leather, others simply rolled and tucked with string. A few look as if they've been read by half the world. You pause, startled. These people don't all look like locals. One man speaks Spanish, his fingers dancing over the spine of a theological treatise. Another wears Persian robes and tells a story about a mapmaker from Shiraz who mislabeled the Sahara as mostly theoretical. A Berber woman corrects him in French. A Fulani poet counters in Songhai. A Moroccan scholar shakes her head and lifts her tea like a gavel. You're witnessing something rare, a salon. A gathering of minds from across empires. And here, in this dusty courtyard, Timbuktu becomes not just a city of books, but a crossroad of civilizations. Historians still debate the extent of Timbuktu's international reach in the 14th and 15th centuries. Some claim it was mythologized by European writers hungry for tales of gold and wisdom. Others point to firm evidence, trade records, maps, letters, and, most tellingly, the books themselves. Texts here were written in Arabic, Latin, Hebrew, Greek. Marginal notes appear in Portuguese, Turkish, and Tamashek. Timbuktu wasn't just producing knowledge, it was importing it. A man with silver rings on every finger offers you a scroll. Mali astronomy, he says. Corrected a Persian error about the moon's arc. They still haven't admitted it. A young scholar beside you passes a manuscript that contains 3 languages on one page, Arabic scripture, local commentary, and a French note dated 2 centuries later. You ask if it's valuable. She says, not to a collector, but to anyone trying to understand how ideas travel. It's a miracle. Over tea, the conversation shifts. Someone recites poetry. Another quotes Aristotle. Then Rumi. Then a fisherman from the Niger River. Each voice folds into the next until the whole gathering feels like one long, wandering sentence with no period in sight. Later, they show you a map, hand-drawn, sun-faded. Not just of Timbuktu, but the routes that lead to it, from Cairo, from Morocco, from the forest kingdoms to the south. You trace the lines with your finger. Everyone ends here. Or maybe begins. As evening falls, lanterns are lit, and the air grows cool. Someone produces a stringed instrument and hums a tune no one knows but everyone seems to recognize. You close your eyes and let the sounds swirl, languages overlapping, ideas colliding, laughter dancing like candlelight. This isn't a formal summit or a recorded lecture. There are no minutes being taken. Yet what happens here might be more important than any official history. Timbuktu didn't just build libraries, it built bridges. Between continents. Between beliefs. Between people who'd never otherwise speak the same tongue. And in this moment, surrounded by borrowed chairs and borrowed words, you feel something that books alone can't offer. You feel connection. You wake to silence. Not the quiet of early morning birdsong or the hush of students bent over books, but a different silence, thick, uneasy, unnatural. Something has changed. You step into the street and see it, shuttered windows, locked doors, dust unsettled but undisturbed. The energy of learning, once pulsing through every alley, now feels paused, like a breath held too long. It didn't happen all at once. Timbuktu's decline crept in slowly, like sand carried by wind, layering over brilliance one grain at a time. First came shifts in trade routes. Then new powers rising elsewhere. The gold that once flowed like a river narrowed to a trickle. Salt lost its glimmering value. And books, those sacred vessels of thought, became targets. Historians still argue about when the decline truly began. Some point to the Moroccan invasion in 1591, when the Saadi dynasty marched in with muskets and took the city by force. Others claim it was erosion from within, political instability, economic fatigue, too many scholars leaving, too few returning. What's clear is this: there was a time when libraries burned. Not by accident. Not from carelessness. But by order. Books deemed dangerous were dragged out into the open and set alight. Some say it was fear. Others, control. A way to silence what could not be governed. You stand before what remains of a great library, now just a low, crumbling wall overtaken by thorn bushes. A carved plaque near the base bears only one word: remember. But all was not lost. Because while flames took pages, they could not consume memory. Families buried manuscripts in clay jars, sealed with wax and hidden beneath floorboards. Some were stashed in caves. Others smuggled far upriver in boats disguised as grain barges. You meet a man whose great-grandfather hid 10 scrolls beneath a donkey's feed trough. When you ask where they are now, he smiles and says, still safe. Still waiting. Some texts were never recovered. Others emerged years, even centuries, later, edges browned, words faint but legible. A few survive only in fragments, passed down orally, retold by memory rather than read aloud. You sit with an old woman who recites a poem her mother once copied from a book that no longer exists. Her voice trembles, but the lines remain. We wrote with ink, yes, but also with breath. And breath, my child, travels farther than fire. The city remains, but not as it was. Some buildings stand, their walls patched with newer clay. Others sink into the ground, half swallowed by time. Yet even now, in the quietest corners, you find signs of what once was. A worn bookmark peeking from a storage jar. A child scratching letters into the dirt with a stick. A doorframe marked with calligraphy so faded it reads like a whisper. And somehow, the silence speaks. It tells you this place mattered. That it changed lives. That its stories are not gone, only quieter. As dusk settles, you walk the empty lanes and think about all the words that once echoed here, the debates and poems, the margin notes and songs. You reach the steps of the Jingariber Mosque, now weathered, its minaret softened by wind. You sit. No one says anything. And yet, the city tells you a story anyway. One without punctuation, still ongoing. Timbuktu didn't vanish. It adapted. It waited. You return to the outskirts, where the sand creeps closer to the city each year, swallowing corners of walls, climbing staircases that once led to scholars' doors. The wind here hums differently, less like music, more like memory. But something pulls you onward. A flicker of movement in a side alley. A shape shifting beneath a bundle of rags. A whisper passed from one old man to another. You follow. Down a narrow path between crumbling homes, you come to a doorway half buried by dune drift. It looks abandoned, forgotten. But when you step inside, the air cools and changes. It smells of leather, of old wood, of things that refuse to be erased. A man greets you with a nod. He's older than time and younger than the city, somehow. Around him, a few others work in silence, carefully lifting the lids of rusted iron lockboxes and cedar chests sealed with wax. No ceremony. No sweeping orchestral reveal. Just slow, practiced hands unwrapping the past. Inside these boxes, books. Hundreds. Bundles wrapped in indigo cloth. Scrolls layered between dried leaves. Pages etched so finely you have to tilt them just right to catch the light. These are the survivors, the ones hidden for centuries in clay ovens, secret tunnels, beneath floorboards, behind false walls. They were passed down in silence, protected in the shadows. And now, in this forgotten cellar at the edge of a shifting city, they emerge again like long-buried seeds daring to grow. You kneel before one and open it slowly. The first page is a medical treatise. The second, a Sufi prayer. On the third, a small note in the margin, for the one reading this, may your hands be kind. You close your eyes. Historians still debate how many manuscripts were saved from the waves of invasion, fire, and neglect. Tens of thousands, perhaps more. Some are now in museums. Some remain hidden in families too afraid to reveal them. And some, like these, reside quietly in places no map records, watched over by descendants who don't need fame, only reverence. You're shown a catalog, handwritten and updated by each generation that's kept the library alive. The script changes from father to daughter, uncle to nephew, mother to son. One name appears 5 times across 2 centuries, each time with a different flourish. You ask what happens next. The old man shrugs. We wait, until someone needs them again. Outside, the wind picks up. The sand dances in soft arcs. The city doesn't protest. It knows the rhythm. Timbuktu has never shouted its story. It has whispered it, page by page, into those willing to listen. You step back into the light, blinking against the brightness. The rusted lockboxes remain behind, sealed again, not out of fear, but respect. Not everything is meant for display. Some things, like knowledge, are meant to endure quietly. You walk toward the river. The city behind you fades into silhouette, and you realize something deeply calming. Timbuktu was never just a book lover's dream. It was a book's dream of being loved. Now, let the light of Timbuktu fade gently behind your eyes. Let the scent of ink and desert wind drift into memory, soft as parchment under fingertips. The camels have stopped their walking. The donkeys are asleep in their stables. The scholars rest now, their pens dry, their voices stilled into the silence of paper. Feel the calm. Let it settle deep. The streets of Timbuktu are quiet again. But they are not empty. Somewhere, a child traces her first letter in the dirt with a stick. Somewhere else, an old man recites a poem to the wind, knowing it will carry his words where no camel ever could. And beneath layers of sand and clay and time, books still breathe. They wait, as they always have, for gentle hands and curious hearts. So, let your breathing slow. In. Out. Like the tide of the Niger River. Like the pulse of an old scribe copying a line he's copied 100 times before, only slower now, softer, not for anyone else, just for the quiet joy of doing it again. The city may sleep, but knowledge never does. It simply changes form. From lips to page, from ink to ash, from silence to story. And now, let your own story rest. You've walked the alleys. You've turned the pages. You've heard the echoes. And you, too, are part of the memory now. The books are watching over you. Sweet dreams.